My name is Isabel. I'm going into my fourth year of CSP, Contemporary Studies, and I'm also doing a major in history alongside that.
My name is Jeannine. I'm a 2020 King's graduate. I majored in religious studies and I minored in history and English. The science and religion courses at King's, the historical perspectives and contemporary perspectives course, address the often very complicated relationship between religion and science throughout history and currently.
I thought it was really interesting because I was doing CSP 3000, which is focusing on science and culture in contemporary theory. And I was also doing Catherine Morris's feminist science class. It was really interesting to take all three of those courses together because they all were kind of breaking down my idea of what science was. I had never done science in high school. I think I did like grade 10 chemistry. It was really, really interesting to have all of these courses reintroduce me to science and show me that you could study it as a humanities student and that there were all these interesting ways of like approaching it.
We looked at some of the popular opinions and stereotypes of science and religion as they coincide and found that most of the time they're represented to be antagonistic. But we learned that rather than being at war with one another, science and religion actually have a very intimate relationship, and without one, the other could not exist.
Dr. Snowland's class was really interesting because it kind of showed me how you could approach science and religion as like two sides of the same coin. What really stuck with me was like looking at older religious texts and seeing the cosmologies and the mythologies and the ideas that were laid out were a type of ancient scientific method in their own right, and kind of like breaking down this idea of like science that I think that we might be really beholden to like in the contemporary world. I thought it was really interesting how Dr. Snowland focused on the role of language and narrative as a form of scientific methodology. I guess Genesis particularly stuck in my mind because it was going through the days and through, the different realms of things that had been created during these days. And I had never considered that this would have been a sort of proto-scientific text before. It was really fascinating to see the ways storytelling and narrative could comprise like what your idea of science was back then.
I wrote my final paper in the historical perspectives course on early modern midwifery.
Oh, I had so much fun writing this final paper. It was on someone who I have admired for a really long time. Her name was Hildegard of Bingen, and she was working and living, I think, in the 12th or 11th century in the border between Germany and France. Essentially, she wrote a lot of medieval texts on herbalism, also medicine, and also spirituality. So she's kind of at the intersection between medicine, science, and mysticism. And I was particularly looking at her idea of viriditas. Viriditas is a sort of life force that makes plants grow and generally just like was this really cool nun who got to do what she wanted, which is always fascinating to me.
With this knowledge, I feel I can go forth and make critical observations of what's going on around me without being judgmental, without being closed-minded, and without falling into the trap of fear-based thinking. You're guaranteed to be intrigued, inspired, and challenged.